Hey, everybody. I am John Muir Laws. I am a wildlife biologist. I'm a naturalist by training, and I've spent most of my life working in education to connect people with the natural world. And of late, I've also been doing lots of work on understanding what science is, public understanding of science, and how can we get kids to engage with that in a way that is meaningful, useful, and helps them understand scientific processes. Here's the spoiler alert. It's keeping the Nature Journal. I firmly believe that keeping a journal of all of your experiences, your observations, the questions, the discoveries that you make, the processes that you use to figure things out, getting all that stuff out of here and into here is a game changer in the way that we think. Human brains are really, really, really limited. A wonderful little connectome of neurons in here, and it gets us through our day effectively. But when we want this to do higher level thinking, it starts to break down. And the part of the problem is that this can only keep track of a little bit of information at once. And if you want to, in order to solve complex problems, you need to juggle a whole bunch of information. Our brains can do, they think it's about, kind of juggle about 7 ideas at a time, plus or minus 2. And that's how much our brain, oh, please excuse the stickers, or maybe enjoy the stickers. My daughters got a hold of Valentine stickers and decorated my teaching supplies for me. So you'll be seeing a number of stickers today. But so that's what's called cognitive load. And if I try to get you just to work things out in your head, we quickly kind of bump into the limits of what our brains can do. But the paper is unlimited. So if you if there's something important that you're trying to remember, the thing that works the best for all of us is writing it down on paper, right? Why is something like this in the kitchen of every home? It's because it works, right? And this works for your grocery list. It also works for any kind of thinking where you're going to have to kind of get a lot of stuff on the table. If you are trying to do it inside your gray matter, then whatever idea you have is going to feel like a really good idea. But the minute you get it out onto paper, you can look at it and kind of go like, not so much. Have you ever been talking to somebody about something and then realized partway through, like, oh, wait a minute, let's not do that. Right? But when it was sitting inside your head, it felt like a good idea. It turns out that all of our thinking works that way. And so the thing that works is to externalize your thinking. And so what this means is to get your thinking out of here and into either discourse with other people and or onto a piece of paper. And our old notions of cognition used to be just what was happening inside the gray matter, but modern understanding of the way that our brains work, this idea of distributed cognition has arisen. So let's say there's somebody in your school that is really good with social emotional learning, and you've got a student who's really challenging with social emotional learning. You sit down in the staff room and you talk with that person, right? And this is an extension of the way that you think. Scientists work in groups and we share ideas and we talk with each other. That's distributed cognition. If you are having a problem on your taxes, you use the calculator and you go like, oh, that tool is an extension of your cognitive processes. And similarly, if you've got ideas and you put them out onto a piece of paper, that is distributed cognition. It is but how can we most effectively use our brains? It turns out we need to teach our brains how to use the right adjuncts and tools to help us grapple with more complex ideas, concepts, questions. Otherwise, what will happen is if I set you out in the field and there's a flower in front of you and I say, I want you to look really carefully at this, what we do is we go and you stare at it, and it kind of stares back, and your brain quickly figures out, it's not going to eat me. I don't think I'm going to eat it. I'm okay here. And then we start mind wandering, and we go into what are called rumination loops, or even if you're like, you know, like I want here, everybody look really carefully at this. No, look harder. Now look even harder. Right? No, really, really, really hard. Like you tell somebody to look really hard at something, your brain quickly goes like, okay, basically got it, and I'm done. And then what will happen, even if you keep staring at this, is your brain will just start to notice a few features, and then we'll just start re-noticing those again and again and again. But you have the subjective experience of looking really hard at something. So even if everybody's like their binoculars up, there's a bird in front of them. What we do very quickly is we kind of notice a few things, and then we start noticing those few things again and again and again and again. And that's because that's easier for our brain to do. And we don't know that we're doing it. So it's easier for your brain. Your brain takes any shortcut it can to not have to do the work. Because this is super expensive. Your brain is 2% of your body weight, and it uses 20% of all the calories you can consume. So that is 1 out of every 5 burritos goes to feed this. So for our students, like their brain is kind of quickly going like, not essential for my survival. Okay, let's rumination loop. How can you get out of that? You can get out of that through discourse. So if we are discussing something with somebody, and I say, make an observation about something, my brain knows I've already said that, and so I don't have to re-say it. So too with if I put it down on the grocery list, right? I've got this idea, I put it on the list, and then I've got, my brain is then freed up to do other things, and I don't lose this information. It allows you to engage with much more information at once. Every scientist that you can name kept a journal like this. So right now, what's the first scientist that comes to your name, your mind? Lauren, what scientist comes to your mind?
Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein. All right, we have extensive notebooks from Einstein, right? Which involve all sorts of visualizations as well as mathematical equations. Ms. Kaylee, what scientist came to your mind?
Isaac Newton.
We have glorious notebooks, Newton's notebooks. Those had all sorts of diagrams and sketches. In addition to writing, Newton was drawing all these pictures of the stuff that he was figuring out. And Vanessa, what came to your mind?
Marie Curie.
Marie Curie. The same thing. We have all those scientists, the three of you mentioned. Each one of those scientists, we actually have their notebooks, and you actually can see a bunch of those notebook pages online. So it's no coincidence that the scientists that came to your mind kept notebooks, because any scientist who didn't keep a notebook, nobody knows their names. They didn't contribute anything. If you're trying to work it out in your head, it's not going to work out well for you. So we have to get it out of there and into here. And then an amazing thing happens, because now as you're looking at these observations that you've made, you're your brain can see the things that you've noticed. So you can see your questions. You can actually start to do metacognition. You can start to think about what you're thinking about. You can notice what you're noticing. You can see what sorts of questions you ask. You also have a historical record of observations from the past. And you can use those to figure out, to find patterns or things in the future. Our brains are terrible at remembering. You have the subjective experience of being good at remembering, but your brain is a terrible remembering machine. And so, it turns out that eyewitness testimony is horrible. It's horrible. Our brains are creative. We are constantly forgetting things, and then as we forget things, we fill in all the holes with stuff that we completely make up. That's called confabulation. So our little memories change as time goes on. And but you have the subjective experience of like, oh no, I can remember it vividly. This experience that you had, you remember it vividly. Part of what you're remembering vividly may have happened. But what we're finding out is that large parts of the things that we think happened are stuff that we made up. So if we're trying to get people to make arguments from evidence, it's tough if we have this sort of shifting stance. Let's take a look inside some of my nature journals, and I'll just kind of give you some examples of kind of what's going on in there and sort of what this tool can be as a thinking tool. So, oh, hold on a second. I just realized I don't have my camera plugged in at all. All right, we'll try this again. There we go. Thank you, document cameras. I don't know how we would have gotten through that pandemic without them. So this is my nature journal, and anytime I'm out exploring things, I am documenting what I see. A lot of people notice that my journals contain lots of pictures in them. So pictures are one tool that you have to investigate with your journal, but you also see that I am intentionally using words. And as you look in, so here, this thing preened for 5 minutes. Hard to show that in, hard to show that with my pictures. But if I also have numbers in there, so words, pictures, and numbers, these are the 3 languages that I want to intentionally use. Each one of these involves, of course, any thought process actually is probably involving, all of your brain. The sort of the hyper specialization of things, not so much. But there is a zone in the back of your brain that is very involved in visual processing. Your visual cortex is back here. So these words are, these pictures are being handled up here. Your prefrontal cortex up here is doing a lot of the stuff with words. And so that's happening up in there. There's on fMRIs, there's a strip above the ear in here in the middle that lights up when we're playing with numbers. So it appears that by intentionally doing all these different things, you're forcing your brain to use all these different regions. You're giving yourself essentially more of a trampoline for all these ideas to bounce off of each other. So the tools are your words, pictures, and numbers. And within this, there are skills and things that you can do to get better at using numbers. There are other strategies that improve our words. There are other strategies to give us more tools with pictures. A lot of people get focused on the pictures, and they get hung up on that. And if they like drawing, then they go like, okay, I like doing this. But if they don't like drawing, they go, okay, nature journaling is not for me.
but it's not about the pictures. The pictures are a tool in the process of engaging with whatever phenomenon you are looking at. So that can be whether here I'm studying the wing patterns of a black vulture, and here I'm making a diagram of my car showing where the dew formed and where the frost formed on my car. But again, and then this is trying to figure out what's going on with that, why that is. This is a little note about frost, dew forming on the window. We had a Christmas wreath on there, and there was a ring around that had no dew forming on it. So there's a phenomenon that I've encountered. This is a tool for investigating any phenomenon in the most sort of the deepest way that we can. The phenomena can be, phenomena are everywhere. So this is my notes about looking, my daughters were at swimming lessons in a shallow pool. And this is looking at what the reflections and sort of light patterns were sort of zigzagging on the bottom of the pool and how that pattern changed as I looked up across the pool. And then this part down here is speculating about why that is. And if I were just on my own, I might say to myself like, huh, I wonder why that is. Or might not even notice it. I'm just kind of like, I'm there at the pool. But if I'm intentionally getting myself curious about phenomena, I've got a way of recording all my thoughts and ideas about what's going on. So the stuff that I'm putting in here, there are sort of broadly 3 categories of things that I put in here. And it starts with my observations. So anything that I notice goes into this book. If I make, here's observations about a phoebe, a Cooper's hawk, whatever it is. That could be what, you know, here are some notes about, you know, bald eagles. I'm looking at, listening to them. I'm looking at their postures, recording their behaviors. So those are all observations. I notice these things. The next step from that is to let those observations stimulate questions that I have about the phenomena that I see. So I was looking at, there are some olives on trees out at this abandoned farm, and nobody was eating the olives. They were just falling onto the ground. So why does nobody eat the olives? This is what I want to do, is let the phenomenon drive questions. So I'm not kind of coming up with my own, just my own questions about something and going from there, or somebody else's questions. I'm coming up with my own questions based on the phenomena that I observe. There is one third part of this, which we call "it reminds me of." And that is to intentionally look for, how does what I'm seeing and observing here, how is this similar to or different from other things that I have experienced or observed before? And so what I am doing there is intentionally trying to get my brain to engage in intense observation, to enhance my curiosity. And also this piece here, it reminds me of, this is where creative thinking comes in. I want to train myself to think creatively. That will inspire me to look at things in a different way and to ask questions in a different way. And so here, I know that creativity is sort of a buzzword that gets thrown around. The specific definition that I'm using for creativity is your brain's ability to make useful connections between seemingly unrelated things. So useful connections between seemingly unrelated things. So if I can say like, oh, this is like this other thing that I've seen. I'm making connections in my brain and I want to practice that. So I've got essentially what nature journaling is there's one triad, which is words, pictures, and numbers. There's this another triad, which is I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And what you're doing with nature journaling is you are putting those two together and implanting that on the page of your journal. So you've got words, pictures, and numbers. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. We're putting those together. And that's what we're pushing into the pages of the journal. The more you do this, the better you will think, the better you will be able to do this. Within these things, there are strategies that you can use to get better at with words. There's many ways of using words, from creating titles to using color to bullet points to writing paragraphs. So too with pictures. With pictures, you can make diagrams. You can make portraits of things. You can create maps and cross sections. You can show movement and arrows and relationships. So you've got a whole smorgasbord of visual tools that you can bring together. And similarly with numbers, you can count things, you can measure things. You can measure the wind. You can make graphs. You can visualize information. And you're going to be training yourself to kind of have more tools to be able to do all of these things. So that is, let me just sort of show you some pages that are done with kids and students. So I do this when I'm on my own. So this was me in my backyard. I found a sprinkler, and there was a sprinkler that was making rainbows. You could see rainbows in the sprinkler, and this is measuring the distances between this double rainbow formation, sort of figuring out what this was, kind of collecting information on my own, comparing that with stuff that I found in a physics book there. These questions led me to go on and do other things. This is my recollection of what I thought was going on in raindrops. When you're seeing a rainbow. And then the other one was what my recollection was of how you can get a double rainbow and what's going on inside that. I didn't know if this was correct, but how it was fun for me to kind of on paper try to remember, like, what is going on inside that raindrop with all the reflection and refraction and all that sort of stuff. These are my notes about getting COVID. These are my notes about sort of a caterpillar's, the way it munches poppies outside my house. Instead of anything can become a phenomenon. This is the onion that my daughter adopted. We found this onion that was sprouting in our pantry, and so we adopted it, and then it started to have all these sort of interesting changes. This is the iris outside my house. This is analyzing the shape of Venus and what I can see on Venus. And my thinking about, why am I seeing that? What is happening in the positions of the planets, so that I see a crescent when I'm looking out at Venus. So the geeking out can be about any sort of thing. Phenomena are everywhere. So here's my friend, the onion again, looking at the growth rates from 2 different nodes on this. And this is the orange that got moldy in my pantry, and all the questions that came from that. Catch up with the orange a little bit later. And there it is. It really started to go. Eventually, my family made me throw this out. But there's so much that we can learn just from the phenomena that are around us every day. And if we can, these pages can hold so much more information than my brain can. So how can I train myself to use this effectively and get kids excited about doing this themselves? Second, I'm going to bounce back to you. Hi, it's me again. So here's what I found doesn't work. Here's your journal. Go outside a nature journal. Come back in 45 minutes. Because there's no scaffolding there. There's no structure. There's no like what? And also, why do I care? Why am I doing this? So I want to get kids to inherently buy in on this. And I need to progressively build them with skills to be able to do this. And I want to do it in a way that's not going to turn them off from the project. And all those are very, very doable. At the start, what I would do is sort of introduce them to, and so this is journaling. And there are lots of examples now of, you can find online, of nature journal pages just like these. I've got an Instagram feed that has a bunch of my journal pages on it. Many other people do as well. You can use those as examples. There's something called the Nature Journal Club. It's a Facebook group, and there are thousands of, what is it, 70,000 people now, all over the globe who are putting in nature journal pages and sharing those. There's also another Facebook group specifically for teachers, for people who are teaching. If you type in how to teach nature journaling, there's a Facebook group about that. So you can get examples of this. You can also show examples, just do online, like find Marie Curie's journals, right? And these can come up. You can find examples of this. You can find Rosalind Franklin's journals. You can find, most people are familiar with Da Vinci's journals. So a lot of these are online, and you can show that this is something that all these people do, and they're doing it because it works. And this is really cool. Some of the students are going to be looking at it and seeing like, yeah, but there are these drawings on it and I can't draw. So the I can't draw thing is probably one of the big reasons that sends up a red flag to kids saying that like, oh no, maybe this is something that I'm not going to be successful at. And if kids are worried they're not going to be successful at something, sometimes they don't try. So what can you do about this? Glad you asked. Talk about that right up front. I talk with the students about how we get good at drawing. Do you want to be good at drawing? Well, turns out the people who are good at drawing, they draw a lot. This is a great place to have growth mindset conversations. And if you as the teacher have not drawn since you were in 5th grade, when you pick up your journal, you're going to be starting there. You're going to find that if you start doing this on a regular basis as part of your curriculum, this gives you the excuse to be journaling all the time. You get yourself journaling on a regular basis, you'll very quickly develop these skills. So it is not, drawing is not a gift that some people have and some people don't. It's a skill that you can develop by repetition with effort. So that's the cue for neuroplasticity, it's repetition with effort. And you're going to try it, you're going to try it, and try it, and try it, try it. It doesn't matter whether you get a pretty picture. Let me say that again, because it's really important. It doesn't matter whether or not you get a pretty picture. Sometimes the pictures are pretty, sometimes the pictures are not. That doesn't matter. What does matter is as a scientist, we're not interested in a pretty picture, we're interested in a useful picture. So if the picture that you do helps you remember something more vividly, or helps you notice something that you otherwise wouldn't have seen, or be able to communicate something that you've observed, that picture is successful. It worked. If drawing that picture slowed you down to the point where you noticed some detail and then even came up with a question about that, even better, that picture is successful. It doesn't matter if it's a pretty picture. So we're going to move the goalpost on why we're drawing. Very often in an art class, people are drawing to make pretty pictures. In nature journaling, we're drawing to make useful pictures that are either going to help us observe, or they are going to help us document and record what we're seeing. And that's the game changer. And then I probably should sort of say this now. What's going to happen is, because you give students that permission, they are going to take a risk and put drawings into their work. And to continue that, the way you give feedback is really, really important. So if I tell you it's not about pretty pictures, and then I pick up your journal and I go like, oh, honey, you did such a good job. This is beautiful. Oh, what a gorgeous picture, right? Well, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem, because I just told them it's not about pretty pictures. And now what am I giving feedback on? Good job, you did a pretty picture. So the kid who always draws the pretty pictures, they were, they showed you their drawing because they wanted more of that sort of, good job, pretty picture feedback that they always get. The kid who took a risk, who doesn't feel comfortable drawing, when they hear that pretty picture feedback going on over there, they're like, oh, wait a minute. This really was about making pretty pictures all along? Oh, so this was another one of those grown-up tricks. Interesting. Well, you got me this time. See if you get me again. Right? Because we've told them it's not about pretty pictures. They just discovered by watching your actions that it really is about those pretty pictures. So what works really, really well when you're giving feedback is just to be a little mirror to them. And what you're going to do is you're trying to get them to record the world that they see. And you just want to, as they do that on their page, you've got this set of cues to help you with feedback. And so let's just think about I notice. What you could do is just like, oh, I noticed that you noticed this thing. Good noticing, right? Like, so let's take a look at a journal page, and we'll take a look at how I can use the I notice prompt. So here is so here's a page. All right. I noticed that that you've seen that in the owl pellet there's a little skull in there. You can see the bones in there. I mean, that's such a cool observation, right? All I have to do is just that I'm noticing that you noticed this. Good noticing. Another thing that I can do, right? Or I noticed that you've observed that the face of the owl, has this these bars coming down. Oh, you did, and it reminds me of. Well, that kind of reminded you of a little Greek helmet. Oh, that's cool. This was actually drawn in there because I was with a kid who said, oh, it's like the Greek helmets. I said, what do you mean? And the kid drew a little picture just like this. I'm like, oh, I got to draw that same picture in my journal. Isn't that cool? I mean, look, that's totally a Greek element. And so what I'm doing is I'm just going, oh, I'm noticing that you notice this. Good noticing. Another thing I can do is I can notice their questions, right? I can say, all right, let's see, questions. So here's this mushroom, and it's all kind of crusted up. And you wrote, how does it look fresh? I mean, that's a really interesting question. So you're thinking back in time. All I'm doing is noticing a question, or noticing the it reminds me of they've done, or I am noticing the observation. So I can notice there, I notices, I wonders, and it reminds me of. And any one of those can, I'm then giving feedback about the process that I wanted them to engage with. All I have to do is honor it and reflect it back to them. I can also use the I wonder prompt to engage with them. So I look at this like I wonder why, I wonder what the structure of this face does. Maybe I've read something about facial discs focusing sound. Does this structure here, what I'm seeing there, I wonder if, so I can ask them about that. I could say like I wonder about this. I can look at any little thing that they have on the page and see if I can link a question to it. Like, I wonder how long the owl pellets sit in, how long does it take from I've swallowed the bird till it comes out like this in this little bird kit, right? So what I'm doing is I'm just taking I notice that they put down, and I'm role modeling, asking questions about that. And that gets me engaging with the stuff that they've done. I can also do an it reminds me of, right? If you're looking at this stuff, you can say, oh, I remember when I found these pellets over at the Sally barn, right? That, and whatever it is that whatever it is that reminds me of this, you can engage them in a conversation with that. Sometimes people will record things, and that ties into something that for instance, like it reminds you of the stuff that you might have read in a journal article about the facial disc of the owl. It's up here in the rafters of the barn. I wonder how sensitive their eyes really are to light. Like, does sitting out in brighter light, is that really uncomfortable for them because of their super sensitive eyes? Like, wouldn't by squinting and by their pupil kind of getting smaller, isn't that how we handle that? But does it really bother them to be like, so I'm just kind of, I'm noticing something, it reminds me of something, I can ask questions about that. And what this does is gets me authentically interacting with the stuff that they put on the page, instead of, notice that what I'm not doing is going like, oh, that's such a pretty drawing of an owl. I love the way you draw owls. Right? I'm using this as a springboard to the deeper, richer stuff. And you can do this about any journal page. Just, I noticed that you noticed this. Good noticing. That's like the low-hanging fruit of like easy, relevant feedback. And then once the kids see like, oh, we're getting feedback for our observations, they're going to make more observations. A great strategy to do, if somebody has a page, there's a really incredible drawing on it, is engage with maybe a question that they wrote on that page. They're expecting that the feedback is going to come back on this drawing. And what if you're like, oh, wow. Oh, check this out. What an interesting question. I've never thought about that. What are some possible, that's so cool. And you have this whole discussion about this thing. And it makes them realize like, oh, you're really valuing my questions. That's interesting. I think I'm going to do more of that. One other strategy that you can use for giving feedback on journal pages, if you see a student doing something and you want more of your students to do that, like let's say the metadata, you're putting in the date and the location, maybe the weather. if a student is regularly doing that, I go like, oh wow, look at all these pages. You always put it in the metadata. Hey, that's really, really good. I mean, that's what scientists do, because without that, it's just, here's this observation of the bird. But with that connected to it, it's data. It's really useful scientific information. So scientists are already doing the same thing. That's really cool. Right. So I'm just noticing a strategy, like, oh, you did a side view and a top view. You know, architects do that same thing. That's a really useful strategy. Where else could we use that, right? So just think how different that is to looking at a page and kind of like, oh, that's so nice. It's really great. It's pretty, right? And sometimes you're looking at a drawing and it's not a pretty picture and they know it. And so if we then do the insincere adult thing of like, oh, that's so nice, honey. That's gorgeous. That's beautiful. They're looking at it and they're going, no, it's not. And you know it too. And then your credibility, your street cred with them has just gone, because they've seen that like you're making just some, you know, insincere kind of adult comments. When you're engaging with the things this way, it's really valuing the stuff that we really want them to do. Now, how do we then support them to get all that information down on the page? What does the scaffolding look like? This is where it's sort of the other kind of critical part of where the rubber meets the road. And again, what I find is that if I just say, go out in nature journal, like the kids who like drawings, they're going to be out there drawing. Kids who don't are going to be throwing rocks. The kid who likes drawing. How do you give them a structure? What I do is, hold on a second. Oh, hold on a second. I gotta get my dry erase pen. Here's what works. This has been tested a lot with a whole bunch of different kind of kids, and it works really well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to describe an activity. I'm going to kind of give them a clear project to do. At the start, I'm also focusing them on one piece of nature. So there are going to be, you know, of all the different things that are out there that could be a distraction or that they could do. At the start, it helps for me to say, let's look at this. Later on, when they've got the full toolkit, you can just send kids out into the woods and say, you know, go nature journal and be back in an hour. But at the start, it's overwhelming. Like, what do I do? So we're going to focus on this. And there's one skill. So you're going to focus them on the topic. You're going to also focus them on a specific skill that we're going to be developing this part of your nature journaling strategy. And you can use all these other things along with that. But today, we're going to really work on this. So you're introducing the skills one at a time. By the individual skills, I am talking about the was that in this journal? Oh, no. Yes. Why did I have those pages that had all the interesting? I'm not finding it. But the skills, like for instance, writing in a paragraph, that's a skill. Writing with bullet points, that's a skill. Writing as labels in a drawing, that's a skill. And with pictures, it could be making a side view diagram or something, that's a skill. Making an overhead map, that's a skill. making a exploded diagram where I'm going to pull off this petal and draw the petal on the side. I'm going to pull off the stamen, draw the stamen on the side. I'm going to pull out the pistil of the flower, draw the pistil on the side. That's a skill. I'm going to just pick one of those and really, really emphasize it. And that way it's less overwhelming, and I'm going to incrementally build these skills. And I'm going to do this very often in the context of an activity. And that activity is going to have very clear scaffolding with it. And the let me give you an example from
there's another page for this.
Oh, okay.
So this is a book that I wrote with Emily Lygren called How to Teach Nature Journaling. It's about how to teach nature journaling. It's available as a book, but it's also available as a free download on my website to anybody who wants it. And there's one download version that works well for looking at on your computer. There's another one that's a little bit better for printing out. But what this does is we've come up with 31 different field activities that you can do that give you kind of a very clear scaffolding. And I'll show you what the scaffolding looks like. So the general flow of one of these. So here's an activity. We're finding some phenomenon that they're going to explain. So it gives you a little bit of kind of overview of what's going to be happening there, defining terms that we are going to be using. And then there's a procedure summary. So that it's going to sort of tell you what you're going to do. And then there is an example of a demonstration. For each one of the activities in here, there is an example of the demonstration. And what the demonstration is on a whiteboard. I carry a little portable whiteboard like this out with me when I'm in the field. And if I'm describing to them that, all right, we're going to listen to this bird, and it's going to go like, and we're going to put that bird's song down on the paper. Let's say the bird is going dee 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 dee. I can go like, oh wow, that's like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So I can go dee 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 dee. Right. So my little marks that I make on my paper can go up. I can go D, D. I can write words with it. La, la. These ones are maybe high, sort of sweet, 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 sweet. T, or maybe this was a trill. So I can go trill and make this a little gig like that. Like D, 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 D. Right? So I can then say, oh, and it's like Twinkle, Twinkle. So I'm going to write that it's like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And it is low pitched. And it's sung from the top of the acacia next to the school. Can't see the bird. Right? So this is what I'm doing is I'm giving I'm giving a little description of, as I'm describing to them what I'm going to be doing, I'm demonstrating what I'm going to be doing, how this could look on their nature journal page. Because we're going to be doing something that is a visual activity, right? putting stuff down into the journal, you're ultimately turning it into a visual thing. And so, as they're making that translation, it really helps to have a visual that is created of where they're going to be going. This does not need to be pretty pictures. So this one here, this activity questioning questions, it starts with them, the kids, they find some plant. Let's say some kid has found a little dandelion, and you're going to make a little drawing of that. You're going to add in some written notes with that. In a previous class, you taught them how to make a label diagram. I'm going to make a label diagram of that. And ooh, there's a little bud coming out in here, right? And then what I'm going to be doing is around the outside edge, I'm going to be asking questions. So if I've got some questions about the leaves, these leaves have these little bumps and hairs on them. And I'm wondering, what do those do? So I write that question in here. And then I've got another question about this. I'm going to write those in here. A question about, ooh, there's one of those little dandelion heads here. And I've got some questions about how those are, how far they can go in the wind, or the shape of the flower, or do these things, do they get taller as they grow? And I can even put in some of these questions. I can put those to sort of connect to specific things or not. And so you see how me describing, put the thing in the middle, then put the questions around it. Anybody seeing that, they know what to do on their page now. They know what they're going to be doing, how their project could look. And that's very, very helpful. It kind of gives everybody like, oh, I see what we're doing. And then you can at the end, so so here is the procedure summary. There's the little demonstration that you're going to be giving as an example of what would be in the demonstration. And then the book goes into procedures step by step. I would first do this, and this is kind of done in script style so that you could sort of see how a teacher might say these things. You don't need to read this out line for line. Basically, if you get the procedure summary, this is what you'd look at before you kind of go out. And then you know what to do. But if you're wondering, like, what are some ways that I could express that? This gives you some of those ideas. And then the kids go out and they do the activity. And then they come back, and you have, rather than just go out and do the nature journaling activity, they have just gone out and done this intense observation to get that to the next level, to make it really, really useful for them. What I want to do is then have a discussion with them about, I want to have a discussion with them about what they just did. So we all sit down together. Maybe this involves sharing some of the stuff that we've done. And so, let's hear from a few interesting questions you came up with. And then it kind of gives you some, strategies of things to do with that. It also, with the different activities, like here's one on making landscapes. In the discussion, notice that in the discussion, there's the general discussion that you'd have. And then there are listed some, are you in a state that is using next generation science standards? Question?
Last time I looked at the sign, I believe so.
Yeah, okay, you're an NGSS state. So I love the next generation science standards. So and one of the things that is in those that kind of confuses a lot of people is this idea of cross-cutting concepts, these sort of big picture ideas. And here what I'm doing is I'm going to pick one of these cross-cutting concepts. Here I've got patterns, cause and effect, stability and change. And I can engage the kids in a conversation about cause and effect based on the activities that they just did, the things that they just did. Like, or here in this questions one, the questions that come from that are all about asking questions and defining projects. One of the defining problems, one of the science and engineering practices. of the next generation science standards. So I sit down with the kids, we have a discussion. As part of that, I will ask them to look at their questions and pick which one is the most interesting question to them. In this case, the kid thinks that this one is the most interesting, so they're going to make a little bubble letter question mark that's big next to this one to highlight it. They're going to look at their observations. They might say, like, this is the coolest thing that I noticed. I'm going to put an exclamation or maybe even googly eyes next to that one. Kind of looking over at that, kind of going, whoa, check that observation out. That's interesting, right? And so I'm doing metacognition. I'm engaging with a conversation. There was structure at the start. There's structure at the end. And this allows you to get a lot more out of these conversations really, really quickly. So again, the structure for the activity, the scaffolding, what it looks like, is I'm going to introduce an activity. I'm going to show you what it could look like as I'm describing what you're going to be doing on my little dry erase board. I'm going to check for understanding, send them out to do it. They go out to do it. Then when the activity is over, we come back, we gather up again, and we sit down and we have a discussion based on the activity that they just did, the observations that they made. They all now have the same kind of common base of understanding. And so that is, I'm going to use that for the discussion that we can have. And that makes it something that more kids can participate in, because they all have been looking at this. They've all been thinking about the same thing. And we can then have that discussion. One other thing that you will find is that when you show some kids the activity, you set them out there to do it. So how many people who have, I've tried this before, you've sent kids out to do a nature journaling activity. They sit down, they start to do it, and within about 2 minutes, there's that one kid who's like, okay, I'm done. Right. Okay, I'm done. And then they want to stand up. They want to walk over to their other friend and say, like, what are you doing? Are you done? I already finished mine. Yeah, you know, let's go disrupt this activity. Right? It's not you. You didn't do something wrong. This is just something that regularly happens. But there's a useful strategy to, I was running into this problem all the time until I came up with the strategy that it's been really, really good at preventing that. Here's how it works. Is at one point with your group, you want to just sit down and have this discussion. Then you can reinforce it at times past, but sometimes really kind of dig into this with kind of a group discussion. And what it is it's about being done, right? And sort of the concept of being done, what it is, there's a feeling that you get in your body of like, okay, I have finished this, this is good enough, and I'm ready to go. And so being done makes a lot of sense in the context of baking a cake. You put it in the oven a little bit longer, you're gonna burn it. So you're done. But done actually doesn't make sense in the area of inquiry and observation, because the amount of things that the number of things that you could notice about something is truly infinite. So what I often will do is whenever I sit down and try to sketch a poppy, each time each time I do that, I try to notice something that I've never noticed about hobbies before, or ask a question that I've never asked about it before. But even I get that feeling of empowerment through, like, okay, I'm done. I'm, you know, maybe I've finished the drawing, and then we go, oh, my drawing's done. I'm done with observation. How do you get kids to push through that? What you do is you say that at some point during this, and for a lot of people, it comes in right when you finish a drawing, you are going to get a very a kind of clear subjective feeling of I'm done. You're going to get the feeling of I'm done. But it turns out that what that is that's just the point at which you usually stop paying attention. Done is the point where you usually stop paying attention. And what we're doing here is we're trying to push our brains past that point, past that threshold, and to start to notice things that we have never seen before. And so when you get that feeling of being done, just notice it. Right? This is also kind of useful in sort of mindfulness exercises. Just notice that you just got the feeling of being done. And then what you want to do is to continue with your observations, continue to then go like, oh, that's interesting. I just got the feeling of being done. What's the most interesting thing that I can observe or ask after I get that feeling of being done? And just to sort of label it in your head as, oh, that's where I usually stop paying attention. Everything else that I notice from this point on is pushing my brain to the deeper level. And when you kind of metacognitively call out doneness, it loses its power. It loses its grip. Because otherwise you get that feeling of done, and subjectively it is very believable. Right? Like what more can I do? I'm done. And one thing I always find, like the kid feels that they're done, you know, then I can say, like, you can walk up to them and it's like, tell me a little bit more about it. What else do you see? And then they'll be able to say, well, I noticed this, this, and this, and this, and this. And you're like, oh, okay, great, put that down. And what we're doing is we're training our kids to do that themselves. You get that feeling of done. And then you're like, okay, what else is going on here? Okay, yeah, I'll just put that down too. And the next thing, and the next thing. And very often it's when you've sat with something for a little while, that's where some of the really interesting observations start to pop up. And definitely that's where the most interesting questions come from. Very often you have to sit with something for a while to get the question that is behind the question. So not just Grendel, but Grendel's mother. That's a lot more interesting. And but you have to sort of sit with that first thing for a little while to get to the thing behind the thing. And that's very powerful. You can start doing this at any age. Before they are writers, they can leverage drawing. What you can do to help, if you've got a small classroom, you can help those kids by saying, you know, if you've got teacher aides, you can sit down with kids and say, like, okay, tell me about this and describe it for me. Like what words we use to describe it, and just on a separate piece of paper that they can attach to it. Or sometimes people will, if the kid feels comfortable with it, you can write directly in students' journals. But sometimes it's nice to have a little pad of those larger sized Post-its. And you can write down the words that are useful for them, and then they can attach that into their journal. And that way they're being exposed to new words. This also helps kids who are learning new languages. That allows them to engage with language and the visual presentation of things.
as kids are starting with numbers, just counting parts of things, counting numbers of things is a great activity to do. As you get more sophisticated with numbers, you can be estimating things, you can be measuring things, you can be timing things. And those are great ways of extending what you can do. If you've got 4th through 6th graders, you can be doing stem leaf plots, an incredible way of documenting information, and all those strategies again are described in the book on how to teach nature drawing. And it's a free download for anybody that wants. There also, as other resources for you, I want to show you just a few resources that I've put together that I am going to share my screen. And here we go. So this is my website. And I will hide the video panel and the loading media controls. There you go. So this is my website. It's johnmuirlaws.com. And there's a lot of resources on here. Oh, look, 4 teachers. Oh, wow, 4 teachers. Let's go there. So there's a teacher's resource overview. There's stuff about the teachers conference, free nature journaling curriculum, the nature journal connection, free cross-cutting concept poster set, how to find a nature journaling teacher near you if you need a mentor, and a bunch of materials that I put together on measuring the solstices and the equinox. Let's just take a look at some of these. So the nature journaling curriculum, right? This is, there's a page here that will give you links here to order or download this entire book, How to Teach Nature Journaling. The previous incarnation of that was Opening the World Through Nature Journaling, also a free download available here. But everything that is in this is revised, expanded, and updated in this full book. But sometimes people like this because it's very small and compact. There's a Facebook group, How to Teach Nature Journaling. And you can download the Beatles program of the Lawrence Hall of Science, which is Better Environmental Education, Learning, Teaching, Expertise, and Sharing. I am one of their advisors. They developed, we developed lesson plans on nature journaling through them. And so those are all available. So if you go to this, here's the book. You can choose an option. You can choose the print edition, which costs money. The others are free, or you can get both free PDFs. All those are available for you. But wait, there's more, because here's the Nature Journal connection. Let's go there. What I did is I created a, there's ultimately going to be 40. We're in the process of, putting out our last ones. These are 10 to 15-minute videos that there's going to be 40 of them. So a teacher could do 1 a week through a school year. And those are, the idea is that you show it to your class, and then they will learn some skills in it. So here's one. You could make it full screen, and
it starts with a little bit of music intro. I kind of explain what's going on, little insets, and then we you kind of
it could be
fast
a
motion
place where the tide comes up and down. It could be any place that you find that there's some
all right, so I explain how to do that, and then at the very
questions here. The final thing I'm going to do before I go is just sort of, I'm going to check in and see if it reminds me of about this place.
and the then there's a little text box how to do it. Yeah, this was only 10 minutes, and at the end of it I give them a little project.
This is your Nature Journal Connection. I'm John Muir Laws. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, and so these are on a whole bunch of different topics, and they go sequentially to help you kind of build skills, and that's useful. So one way to handle nature journaling is you just show one of these to your kids, and then they go out and have a chance to do that. Other things that might be of interest to you, we have a discussion forum every week where we have a bunch of educators all over the globe who are doing nature journaling. We get together in a Zoom call and we talk about different issues and best practices and new innovations in nature journaling, and science education and art education. All you have to do to join those is you go to there's a schedule here. You can find that same schedule here through, go to events. Here, this is, all these are weekly classes on different topics that you can use to extend and develop your own nature journaling skills. And it's a I lead at least three of these every week. The ones that I do are all free. So if you go to Nate's events with JML, there is there's a Ask Jack is a free class I teach every week, where people kind of come in and we kind of problem solve things. Unfortunately, it's during a time during the school day. During lunch break on the Pacific Coast, we have an educators forum. This week today, we're going to be talking about best practices for beginning leaders in the education forum. And every Thursday, I teach a class on sort of more advanced drawing and journaling skills. And all of these are free. You click on that and you can go, there's no pre-registration required with that. If you're not able to make those live, I'm going to go to the blog archives here. We also put those up as blog posts that will link you to the video. And so each one of these is a video of one of those discussions. So NJEF is Nature Journal Educators Forum. When we talked about story, when here we're talking about confirmation bias, why nature journaling. So different topics. All of these are also, there's no paywall here, and these are accessible to all of you. So for instance, let's say you were you're doing a class on some subject. You can find a video on it here, so you could watch these videos, and they're mostly by me. Sometimes I will bring in other people, and you can sort of see how they sort of teach and describe different topics, and that then allows you to let's go to one of these. You know, here's a little workshop on,
Let's talk.
and you know, in these, you know, there's,
A little bit of green.
you know, if you're kind of wondering how to do some of these different skills,
There will be a blur of wings across it. One way of handling that is to first draw in your bird. And then look at the angle that those wings are going across it.
Well, a lot of teachers use these to kind of think, well, sometimes, let's say they're going to be doing a thing on drawing plants. You can assign kids as homework to watch this video. There's no blue language in any of them. Then they come to school the next day having kind of trained up to be able to draw whatever it is. So those all of those resources are available. This is something that you can do. This is something that you'll get better at with practice. It is a form that is authentic. So again, every scientist that you can name keeps journals, right? So if you want your kids to think like Da Vinci, start acting like Da Vinci, right? It also ties into lots of different curriculum areas. This can dovetail with your science. It can dovetail with your history. You go on a field trip to a historical site. Everybody can be doing this as you're going along. And otherwise, you kind of go on the field trip through the stories like that was really cool. They did, but then you forget it. This, you're note taking as you go, and your memory is enhanced, and it makes your brain pay so much more attention in that moment. There's lots of ways of integrating this into different parts of our curriculum. And I think the kids see that it's authentic. They kind of like, okay, that's useful. I see how I'll be able to use and apply this. And this is a skill that I want to develop. It's, and also kids with different kinds of strengths, they can bring those forward in their journal. So if they're more comfortable writing, their journal can be mostly writing. If they're more comfortable drawing, their journal can be mostly drawing. But then we get them to push their comfort zone by also incorporating the other aspects into the journaling process, because then we get that whole brain bouncing around with whatever it is that they're exploring. I am a resource for you. If you're having any difficulty in your classroom, you can reach me through the website as well. You can also join the educators forum and kind of bounce ideas around there. Sometimes when teachers have questions, what I do is we throw it open to the Nature Journaling think tank, this educators forum. The collection of people that have come together in that, there's some really useful brains to pick in that group. So sometimes we're kind of like, this is a problem, and we'll develop a whole, I'll post a topic which will be around a question that a specific teacher had, and then we'll get all those people talking about their experiences and different ways of handling that and showing examples of things that they did with their kids. I hope that this was useful to you, and I hope that you have fun with this. I'd now like to check in with it. We've got 3 teachers live with us today, and I'd love to check in with you folks to see if you have any questions or other comments, thoughts, and ideas, or maybe any notices, I wonders, or it reminds me of that come up for you from doing this.
I know that I found it super helpful and beneficial. I jotted down a lot of notes, and one thing that I noticed is that when I give science lessons right now, although it's in the classroom, I tend to draw some sort of diagram with different bullets of notes. And I have the students, they have a blank science journal that they copy different diagrams. If we're observing, you know, certain living things in the classroom. So they kind of are doing some of this, and I didn't realize it. And I was just making notes that I wanted to incorporate a lot more of this into our lessons, even though they might be in the classroom and, you know, we're doing chemistry next year. I feel like there's a lot of different ways that they can incorporate this sort of observations and note-taking style to keep engaged during the lesson as well as take it outside. So
yes, yeah, this is extremely, extremely useful for any kind of sort of a classroom-based thing. You could be doing this same process with it. So nature journaling, think of nature not as what you see when you're in a national park. Think of nature as, I think of that as in terms of, in contrast to not to human built, because it turns out humans are part of nature. But in contrast to, say, the supernatural. So anything that is a phenomenon that can be observed, documented, described, measured, you can do this with. So you can nature journal about plastic manufacturing, right? It's a tool set that you can apply to any observable phenomenon. And the more you do that, the better you get at it. And you're then also teaching kids visual thinking. How do I think with images? How do I think with pictures? And that's extremely, extremely useful. That's great. Are there any other comments, thoughts, or ideas, I notices, I wonders, or it reminds me of?
It reminds me a little bit of conscious training, but more focused.
that's kind of farther away.
Hello.
Oh, hi there.
It reminds me a little bit of stream of consciousness writing, except more focused, because you do include all those different things and not just observations, things like it reminds me of, or observations, or things like that. There's so many, basically it sounds like you put all of your thoughts onto paper about a specific topic.
Exactly right. You're exactly right. So the I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of is intentionally designed to try to get you to put down, just sort of to brain dump. Here's everything that I've got. When you and sometimes when you're doing stream of consciousness writing, it helps also to have prompts to get your brain to intentionally explore areas that you might not. So sometimes somebody say doing stream of consciousness writing, they might just everything be I notice. And that's why we have that I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of prompts like what do I wonder about? Like not just the knowns, but what are kind of interesting unknowns for me? So to intentionally go like, what don't I know? What could that be? And sometimes the questions don't occur to you until you actually start going, I notice. I mean, I wonder, what do I wonder? What do I wonder? Wonder. What is my wonder toolkit? Oh yeah, who, what, where, when, how, why. Let's play with why. Oh no, look, let's do when. So when do those ducks arrive at the pond? When did that burst? When, how long did that hang out in the digestive tract of the thing? What did this look like, you know, when all of a sudden takes you into all these different directions? But you might not have gone there unless you deliberately prompted that. And it reminds me of intentionally doing things to get kids to network this knowledge with their pre-existing knowledge. That's huge. That's huge. Because that's where a lot of the meaning making happens. So the old idea of like, I open up the skull and I pour information in, that doesn't seem to be the way that we learn. And instead, for me to look at how does this new information network with the stuff that is already in there, the schema that I've previously developed? Does it challenge any of that? Or does it hook onto those things? That will improve our memory of it and help us really deliberately think about how does this fit in or not, and if not, why? So yes, it's stream of consciousness, but it's also so we can also direct that stream to kind of go intentionally into the whole, it reminds me of area, to intentionally go into the whole I wonder zone.
I appreciated just your idea that it reminds me of when I was teaching a number of years ago. I would have students make connections. Like I was like, okay, make a connection to your life or to another class. So I like the other wording of it of it reminds me of. So it reminds me of asking the kids to think of what it reminded me of. And they started to say, hey, Mr. Cade, I noticed or I observed like that. We're learning in social studies something, and that was very similar to what you were talking about in science the other day. And so they started making those connections on their own and pointing them out to me, which is very exciting.
And when kids are doing that, we are, there's really meaningful learning going on. They're networking ideas. Again, creative thought is your ability to make useful connections between seemingly unrelated things. And you're intentionally going out and finding those pieces. Let's think in the social studies class or the civics class or the social emotional program that you have. How do those ideas tie into what we're doing? If you can start to make connections like that, that's huge. And also what that does is it makes room for students to bring into the discussion part of their lived experience. So things that kid has experienced, perhaps something that people who are part of a different socioeconomic group or different culture or different group might not have on their radar, but this invites it into the conversation. And, that is how that's going to help us sort of encounter and be meaningful and relevant to the whole kid.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I've got a lot out of it. And I saw everyone taking lots of notes. So we're so appreciative for all the work that you do. The teachers received your book, but it's great to know that it's available online as well for those watching this after the fact. And yeah, thank you again for, for all.
Okay. So you guys do not need the download. That's great. And again, I'm also here as a resource for you. So you are doing what I believe is the most important critical work in our culture. And any way that I can be of help and support to teachers, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm not somebody who's too busy to do that. If it takes me a little while to get back to you, it's not because I don't care, it's because my inbox is flooded. And I make a priority of getting back to teachers. And again, thank you so much for the work that you are doing for our children and our communities.
Thank you. This is perfect.
Thank you.
Take care.